good evening, and welcome to Conversation with Grandma Polly. Please remember to share and like Conversation with Grandma Polly on Facebook and YouTube. Did you know Black students represent 31% of school related arrests? Black students are suspended and expelled three times more for discretionary violations than white students. Students suspended or expelled for a discretionary violation are nearly three times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile system the following year. Put a pin right there, and we'll be right back. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you guys for joining us. I'd like to remind you once more, please share, like and share Conversation with Grandma Polly on Facebook. Subscribe to us on YouTube. So I want you to stay tuned as we introduce tonight's guest.
Dr. West Olantanji is the founder and CEO of CRESS Program, LLC. She's received numerous awards from national organizations and has been recognized as a fellow in the American Counseling Association. Nationally, Dr. West Olantanji has initiated several clinical research projects that focus on traumatic stress and systematic oppression. Her publications include 3 co-authored books, numerous book chapters, and over 50 articles in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. West Olantanji has delivered research papers throughout Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Now let's give a warm welcome to Dr. West Olantanji.
Yes, yes, yes. Welcome, Dr. Olatunji. It's a pleasure having you here with us this evening, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. And, tonight we're going to be talking about identifying and recognizing the traumas in our Black children. I'm going to let you say hello to the people. And, guys, we have a treat here tonight because they come in a pair, and these are sisters. Dr. Olatunji, please say hello to the people, and then we will bring Dr. West and we'll start our conversation.
Excellent. Well, good evening, and thank you so much for this invitation. I am thrilled to be here. I'm excited. We have a lot to share. And this is such a high quality program that it is such a blessing to be with you. So, hello to everybody, and I look forward to your questions, your comments, your engagement, your commitment. I look forward to it tonight.
Thank you. Y'all will give Dr. Olantanji a hand. And you guys hold on for a minute, because now we're prepared to bring her other half in, her sister, Dr. Constance West. Let's give her a great round of applause.
Dr. Constance West is a licensed clinical psychologist with 20 plus years of service. Her specialties include disaster mental health, health clinical psychology, and juvenile forensic psychology. More specifically, Dr. West has considerable experience in the following areas: stress and coping with acute and chronic stressors such as natural disasters, chronic and infectious diseases, and the promotion of equity concerning race across medical, mental health, juvenile court, and educational settings. Dr. Constance West earned her master's and doctoral degrees in health clinical psychology from the University of Miami. Throughout Dr. West's professional career, she has worked in government, medical, mental health, court, research, and educational settings, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Atlanta Veterans Administration, the Fulton County Juvenile Court, the Grady Infectious Disease Program, and the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Currently, Dr. West is the co founder of Crest Achieve. You can learn more on her website at www.crestprogram.com. Now, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. West.
Yes. Oh, this is such a pleasure. This
Thank
is
you. Thank you.
awesome. I am very excited just to be graced by you two ladies, just to be in your presence. That's a special gift with itself. Dr. Constance West, we're glad to have you here, and I'm glad to cross paths because we have so much to talk about. Say hello to the people, and
Glad to
then
be
we'll
here.
get started with the conversation.
Well, hello everyone. It's a real honor to be here with conversations with Grandma Polly and with Dr. West Olatunji. We have so much to share with you. We're excited to get started.
Yes, yes, yes. Welcome, ladies. And I'm not going to hold you guys up any longer. We're going to dive right into it. The first question we have this evening is what is trauma and what is trauma informed care? Who wants to elaborate on that one for us?
I guess I'll start then. Well, what we want to do is to help adults who are working with children. In this case, we're talking about Black children to understand how to incorporate an understanding of trauma when they're working with children. So that might be being able to identify some of the symptoms of trauma. It might be understanding how we can incorporate interventions and behaviors in whatever it is we're doing. So, if we're a teacher, we want to think about how we can incorporate some trauma informed responses. How can we incorporate our understanding of trauma and also be able to help children with that understanding in what it is that we're doing? If we are a mental health professional, we want to be able to look at maybe the presenting symptoms, meaning what the child is currently doing, and then to think about how trauma might be informing how the child is behaving. And instead of responding to the behaviors specifically, instead think about responding to the trauma, the originating, the activating event. So the idea is for us to acquire skills to be able to understand how trauma can present itself in children and to understand what does that look like in children and then be able to respond.
So, when we think about trauma, we're thinking anything that can be something that can cause a person to feel as though either their life is in jeopardy, they are in jeopardy of being injured in some way, either physically or emotionally, or they're witnessing someone else undergo some situation that is threatening to their life or their person, or to be honest, to who they are. Um, and in those ways, if we have a much broader idea of what trauma is, then we can start to think about it doesn't have to be something that happened to you. It could be something that you've witnessed, or it could even be something that's passed down through the generations. So it could be historical. It could be something that happened to a parent, grandparent, or other family member that sort of echoes or ripples through generations. So we want to think about trauma as being much broader than what we typically think about. And we also want to think about when we say trauma informed, it means that people are fully aware what trauma is and how it impacts, in this case, Black children, and to govern themselves accordingly. So teachers will teach children who they know have been traumatized in a different way than they would if they did not think children had been traumatized. Parents would parent in a way that is different from how they would parent if they did not think about the trauma that our children experience. So those are all things when we talk about trauma informed, it's being aware of what trauma is and how it impacts children, particularly Black children, and thinking, how do we govern ourselves accordingly? How do we do things differently so that we don't re traumatize children and that we also take into consideration what children go through when they're traumatized and to give them the support and uh, equip them to work through those traumas so that they can work towards healing and resilience?
Okay. So we've always heard of trauma, and I don't believe that there's a person walking this earth who has not experienced some type of trauma, whether it was directly or indirectly. And I know when I was speaking with you guys, I brought up the George Floyd situation,
Yes.
and who there is someone who hadn't seen it, then they're not on this earth because we were on lockdown from COVID, which brought trauma because it was a different way of life for everyone. And then to have to sit at home, a lot of times the TV was on more than normal. And to see what happened to George Floyd, I would compare that to a indirect trauma, which traumatized all of us. Um, so I think that's what you were saying, the
Absolutely.
direct and the indirect, because we all were impacted somehow. Am
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
right?
we saw that over and over.
Okay.
So over again. Yes,
Yes. Yes. So with that, we as adults a lot of times have problems processing our feelings and the things that we're going through and we're dealing with. So it's even more difficult for a child. So my next question is, what type of trauma do Black children, what type of trauma our Black children and adolescents experience? Because it's so much, but I'm going to let you guys elaborate on
Yeah, so I'll start and then Dr. West can continue. When we think about the trauma that Black children are experiencing, we can, of course, a lot of people talk about the traumas that they experience in their families and in some cases in their communities. We know that Black families are disproportionately placed, unresourced, and underfunded, disenfranchised communities that disproportionately are impacted by a lot of things, by being in food deserts sometimes, of environmental injustices about where they are. Sometimes housing is developed on top of toxic waste, and we see the impact of that, of living near petrochemical plants, such as down here in New Orleans, and near other toxic waste areas. So we know that there are those things, and so those are forms of trauma. We know that when there are things like disasters, that many times Black children and Black families are disproportionately impacted and have more acute responses to those kinds of things, whether we're talking about floods or hurricanes, tornadoes, forest fires, and so on. So there can be those things that happen as well that can cause severe trauma. Again, here I am in New Orleans. We are 15 years, 16 years after Hurricane Katrina, And we are still traumatized. There's a great documentary that's out. I think it's on Netflix. It's called Katrina Babies, and that documentary is fantastic because it talks about children who survived Hurricane Katrina, but no one talked to them about their mental health issues. And so they are carrying those things with them almost 2 decades later. So we know that whether it's human made disasters or it's natural disasters, that our children often are disproportionately impacted. If we think about the pandemic, about COVID, and think about the many deaths that occurred as a result, I'm sure that many people read news articles or read research articles that talked about how Black communities were disproportionately impacted. And whether it's because we did not have places where we could go and get, shots, or whether we were having difficulty being able to get tests to determine whether or not the symptoms we had were related to or were COVID, and so on. And so we're often under resourced to be able to get the services that we need. That doesn't include things that Dr. West mentioned in thinking about issues in healthcare, about ways in which healthcare providers deal with Black children. Do they ask enough questions? Are they concerned enough? Are they considering all of the issues? And oftentimes they're not. And so, therefore, there's often a delay in the services that need to be provided to our children. There are a host of factors that often will impact ways in which our children experience trauma. Again, that trauma can be intergenerational, happening from generation to generation to generation, experiencing it, and of course, adapting to it. There can be, various kinds of natural disasters that occur. There can be pandemics that occur, and so on. And all of these things actually pile one on top of each other, so that Black children can experience aggravated trauma, where it's more than one thing happening all at the same time. So I don't know if Dr. West want to add to that.
It's hard to add to that. You've said a lot. Uh, but I do want to say that one of the things that happens in our communities a lot is that we have become so accustomed to trauma, to traumatic experiences, that we don't even recognize the significance of what we've been through. So the first level we go to is a higher level. It's the trauma we've been through as a people, right? Uh, the struggle to understand how we've been impacted by, you know, centuries of racism and, of course, slavery as part of that. Losing our culture and our names, like what would our name would have been? What would our name would have been? Like, what's my family name? Based upon my ancestry, is it not the name of the person who owned me? Right? It's the name of my people. Um, so that's the first level. The first level is the trauma of being I guess, victimized by colonialism and racism um, through the decades, generations. I mean, through the centuries. That's like major. Then we have our own personal, well, not even our own personal, we have our family traumas. So we have what sorts of traumatic experiences have our grandparents, great grandparents, have our aunts and uncles, our siblings, and our cousins. What have they gone through? And how has that impacted us? Then we have, okay, here you are as a person. What have you experienced in your life? And we know that people of color, particularly Black people in America, increased risk for all sorts of health conditions and all sorts of situations, being stopped by the police or having discrimination in our jobs and in the school system, even in medical and mental health settings. And so it becomes okay, we have multiple layers of trauma. And oftentimes we are like, we have to move on with our lives. We can't let that trauma stop us. And that has been an effective way of dealing with it in some ways. But in other ways, it has not allowed us to really recognize the depth and breadth of the trauma that we've gone through. And in not recognizing that, we also don't recognize the strength and the courage and
Yes.
determination that we also have demonstrated as an example to the world, right? And so, it's time for us to really, really take a look at what we've been through collectively and individually, and to honor our ancestors and what they went through, honor ourselves for what we were going through, right? And arm our children with the knowledge of the strength of our resilience so that they can be ready to be as successful as they can in the academic world and just in terms of being happy, well adjusted people.
Whew. Whoa. Okay, you ladies are heavy. I mean, y'all really dropping some knowledge this evening, and I want to remind everybody who's on this podcast, please share it. People need to see this, and people need to hear this because during the time y'all was talking, I had 3 or 4 different questions in my head, and they all went whoop because you gave. I mean, the information is great. But I'm noticing someone said in the comments that we have become desensitized, and that's a very true statement. We have become so desensitized, but I'm wondering, and I'm gonna ask questions, but before you guys answer it, we're gonna go to a break and come back. But my question is, when it comes down to us being desensitized, how much of it is being turned inside, where it's internal, where we're holding on to it on the inside and not processing? But before you guys answer that question for me, we're gonna go to our Patreon break, and we'll be right back. Of course, that was our Patreon, and we have some projects that we're working on, and the Patreon will get you into some of the things that we're doing behind the scene, and we'll also get you some gifts. So, support us in our Patreon, and we will really appreciate it. And we're just happy, 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 happy people. Now I'm going back to the question when it comes back to internalizing the traumas that we have experienced and seen. What kind of effect, those things have on us as a people?
Oh my God, it's profound. So we know that people who experience trauma um, experience it in their bodies. Let's start with that. So, in terms of brain activity, in terms of uh, cardiovascular involvement, so looking at things like blood pressure elevations, looking at things like immune function. So people's immune systems don't work as well when they're under stress, um, particularly long-term stress. So in terms of how we think, how our bodies work, and of course our mood, right? So people think about mood a lot. Mood, sleep, all of those things are affected. It's how we see ourselves, right? Um, what we think about our potential. You know, what can I be? What is my life worth? Um, and I think that those are really important things to think about. Even your relationship to your spirituality. So whatever you happen to believe, a lot of times it impacts our the spiritual realm, our spirituality. And so, really, trauma can affect us in many different ways. And the way that it impacts our children so much is in everything from, of course, if they're not sleeping well, they're going to have a difficulty staying awake in class, they're going to have difficulty focusing. It affects their behaviors. So, they don't have the words to express it necessarily. Sometimes they have the words and we're not listening, right? Um, and so it'll be with their behavior. They'll have an attitude, you do it, or they'll just walk out the classroom, or they'll disengage, they'll talk back. So people talk a lot about our children being sassy or thinking they're grown, or um, all these terms that we get bad. I've heard so many times, a lot of times when I've had parents bring children to the court and I say, oh, maybe they need counseling. And they'll say, oh, he's not crazy. He's just bad, right? Sometimes it's more acceptable to us for our children to be locked up, I hate to say that, than for them to be receiving counseling services, right? And so, this idea that there's no excuse for misbehaving, I'm not saying that it's a good thing for kids to misbehave, but we have to start thinking about misbehavior as a sign, right? It's not an endpoint, it's a sign that something is wrong, that something needs to be addressed, we missed something, right? So it's not like it's something to do
Yes.
something about or beat it out of somebody. It's a symptom. You're supposed to say, like your car. If your car
See,
is making noise, you start in your car, you go, hey, my car is making noise. Maybe it's my brakes. Hey, maybe I'm running low on, I don't know, in oil or maybe effort. Try to figure out, hey, that's the problem. Let me see if I can figure out where that's coming from. Instead, we're like, nah, you misbehaving. Okay, you're going to have punishment, right? It becomes no, misbehavior is a symbol, a signal, a sign, a warning. Oh, that's a good one. It's a warning that we need to do something differently. We need to pay attention and address that issue. Otherwise, there's something dangerous coming, right? Or there's something dangerous that's happened that we missed.
it's funny that you said that because just from self experience, I remember myself growing up and in my early years of school was this great student, made great grades, this, that, or whatever. And then by the time I turned 12, something traumatic happened in my life and my behavior changed. I turned into a fighter. I became a fighter. And no one ever stopped to say what happened to this child, what caused the sudden change in behavior. And I think a lot of it is passed down through our culture, as you were saying earlier, grandparents from back coming forward because it was things, oh, we don't talk about this. We whatever happens in this house, stay in this house. All of those things. That's the culture that my age grew up in. Now we're in that culture where everybody's labeled. It's either ADD, ADHD, and all these other labels that they put on these kids and they medicate them. When before, back in our time, it was we don't talk about this, in the house. And then today, now they're labeled as we just medicate everybody. And in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes I think the medication does more damage than it does help because it's masking whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I was gonna say that definitely could be an issue. But what's important is that we need to be able to recognize trauma, and we need to have that in our list of things to consider, right? So, as parents, we want to think about, okay, what is the issue? What is the concern? If we only have one go to, and that go to is that's a bad child, then what happens is that there's nothing for us to do. There's no work, there's no parenting, right? So, what you're saying, right, is that okay, well, we give it up. We, pass over the parenting to the medication. We pass over the parenting
Hmm.
to the physician. We pass over the parenting to the school. So there's nothing for us to do. We need to really think about that. Why is that happening? Is that a trigger for us and our trauma? That the child's behavior is reminding us of our own trauma that is unresolved, that we didn't deal with it. And so we don't want to deal with it with our kids. And maybe we learn that. Maybe that's how our parents dealt with things. They had their own traumas, and what we were doing triggered for them and their parents and their parents. So we need to begin to understand this. As Dr. West said, we need to unpack racism and its impact on our families, our impact on us. So Dr. West started going through some of the things, but let me just run down the list of research where we know the evidence is there. We're not just saying it. Don't walk away saying the West sisters, the Dr. Wests, that we said this. This is in the research. You can go and read it for yourself.
Right.
That racism has been connected to hypertension, cardiovascular problems, uh, high blood pressure, to asthma, to eating disorders, right? And to things like premature birth, to early death, right? To infant mortality. It's like it goes on and on and on. It has already been shown that it's causing this impact. So racism is our number one health problem right now for Black people. We need to understand that. Now let's break it down to children. When we look at children, that is a lot of that is adult. So that's really what mom and dad are dealing with, and grandma and grandpa. That is what they're dealing with. When we talk about the children, how do we see it? We often see it with the behavioral issues that you heard Dr. West talk about as seeing, right, in dealing with children in the juvenile justice system. Again, we've got teachers like parents who want to abdicate their responsibility. So teachers don't have to teach if it's just a bad child. So they get thrown to juvie. They get referred to the juvenile court system, and nobody needs to deal with that. So nobody wants to do the work that's needed. Nobody wants to think, is this child showing me symptoms of something that is greater than what it is that we are currently seeing? So children often will externalize or internalize their behaviors. When they externalize, they tend to take that energy, that experience, those attitudes, and they project it out with their behaviors. So that means that they may have a lot of conflicts with other students, conflicts with authority figures, lots of conflicts. We could accept that as just what that high percentage of Black children are just bad. I don't believe it. That's not possible, right? Or we're going to look and say, what are they reacting to? The internalizing is they take that and they turn it inward, and they become very shy. They have low self esteem. They have experienced depressive mood. They experience anxiety, right? So we know that those are the responses that children have, right? And so we need to be good at looking at what they're doing, or what they're saying, or what they're writing about, or what they listen to, or what they watch on TV, or how they play with each other or interact with each other. See that as a symptom that we need to do something different. We need to learn as parents, as adults, of how are Black people dealing with Black children dealing with this. I'm gonna give you one example, and then I'm gonna let you ask another question. But the example I give oftentimes about how our children can disengage from school. So it's the story of a substitute teacher coming into a middle school to teach social studies. And in teaching social studies, the substitute, and this is a school that's 98% Black. The substitute teacher is Black and comes into the social studies classroom, opens up the social studies textbook, and the first page of the textbook says, Our European Ancestors. So the question is, if you don't understand, what is the relationship between textbooks that start by talking about education and dismissing the whole classroom, dismissing the whole school. The book isn't even talking to you. When it's talking about children and you're talking about education, social studies, our European ancestors, it's not even talking to those kids. So, what does that do for children in terms of their engagement, about what their attitude is about school, about their classes, about homework, about sitting in class, about their teachers, right? About themselves. So when children are acting out, we have to ask ourselves, is it their bad kids? Or do we need to throw out that textbook, right? And think about other ways to educate our children that uplifts them, that talks about who they are, how amazing they are, what their potential is, right? That is what we need to do.
Mm. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
God, oh, you ladies are hitting it on the head tonight. Let me tell you, you just brought took me back to high school, and the class that they social studies was called European Cultural Studies, which I was like, what is this for? And it's all indoctrination. Like you ladies are saying, and I really had no interest in it because it didn't represent me or anything like that, or anybody I knew or family or anything. So I'm enjoying this so much. I just had to comment. I don't do this, but I I just had to chime in. Sorry. Thank you, ladies.
I have to share this story.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've done a lot of work with the juvenile court system. I work with the Child and Protective Services. I've even been a foster parent. But story that really captures, it broke my heart when I heard this story, but it really
Mm.
captures the issue of the trauma, collective trauma that our children are keenly aware of. I remember someone told me a story about a teacher, and I think they were it's a remedial class or something they were teaching. And they were teaching, I guess, reading or something. And a little girl, a little black girl, jumped up and said, "What's the point of learning all this anyway? We're all just the N word." And her thinking was, why should I struggle when the world is against me? Like, what am I going to be? What's my potential? I have limited potential anyway. So what's the point? Why would I even bother? Right? And that's a really good point. And the people were like, "Oh, they just told her, oh, this. Why would you say that she got sent to the principal?" It's like, no, no, no. That is an important topic to cover in class. Like, if you are clear that as a person of color, it's going to be harder for you to get a job, or the police are going to harass you more, or I mean, they know these things. They're seeing that, right? So they know that the world, or there's certain segments of society that see them as being less than, of having less potential, not being as smart, or they're not going to live as long, maybe, or whatever. It becomes, yeah, that is an important question. As people of color, as Black people, we have to answer that. Why do we struggle anyway? Like, why do we keep doing this, even though we know it's harder for us to do things? We already know that it's more difficult. Why do we do it anyway? That's an important point. We need to answer that question, because otherwise, why should she sit there and try to read and make up 3 years of education that she's behind? It's an upward struggle. She wants to know, tell me that I can be something in this world. And if you can show me that, despite what other people, the barriers that other people are putting in my way, that I can be something, then put forth the effort. But if I'm thinking, no, it ain't gonna work out no way, why should I be bothered? And that's an important thing. If you don't cover that in the classroom, in the home, in the school, church, in the neighborhood, wherever, if you're not covering that, then of course our children are going to have difficulty applying themselves, because they need to know that yes, we've always been smart, we've always achieved, we've always been amazing. It's just that these other people around here may not have seen it, right? It's not because it wasn't apparent. You can be blind if you want to, but our brightness shines. It always has, right? And if you can show them that, then it becomes, of course, it can be whatever. I can, if somebody can do it during slavery and learn to read, I know I can do this now, right? But we have to give those examples to our children and answer that important question. Why struggle anyway when the world is against us? There are a million good reasons for that. People did it during slavery, did it on the slave ships, they did it in the cotton fields, right? Then we can do it now.
Mm.
Okay, I mean, like I said, November 2nd, we got to come back because this is way big. But you took me somewhere else. And then I'm going to say this, then I'm going to come back because there's a question out there from the audience. But you said that. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Constance West was one of the people who auditioned for my Big Rig Meet the Grandma Polly Big Rig play. And she's going to be one of the actors in that. But I don't know whether you was there or not, Dr. West, but we were at the library. And that particular day, I brought the characters out. And we were doing the table reading. And at the end, there was a little girl that came up. And she asked me, she said, "Why is Kaden so dark?" And I looked at her. And before I started speaking, her aunt or her mom, whoever was with her, "Oh, you can't ask her." Yes, she can ask me that. This is the reasons I write these stories, and this is the reason I created the characters the way that they are. That junk box, that's what I call the TV and the computers and all that stuff. Not just today with our children, but it has been something that has been indoctrinated in our culture from back when. You're too dark. You're not light enough. You're not thin enough. You're not pretty enough. You don't speak well enough. You're just not enough
Mm.
because of the color of your skin. And I
Right.
created each one of my black characters in different tones of that black skin because that's how we come. We come from high yellow to deep dark chocolate to charcoal black. And we are some beautiful people. And my argument is we have to stop waiting on them to come and tell us how pretty we are. And we
Mm.
need to do this in our own communities. That's my argument.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Stop
Yeah.
allowing other people to validate you by who they think or say you are. Let's teach
Amen.
our children who they are.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of things that cross paths, and I'm so excited to have joined you guys. I mean, we got some work to do on both sides.
Absolutely.
And the question here is, are you finding that we are becoming more open seeking therapy than we've ever been? And then there's another part. What resources are available for parents who don't know how to talk to their children or where to start? That's two questions in one, but I had to get it out. Who wanted
Absolutely. So
the say the loud part? Y'all know I'm messing my name up in a heartbeat. Dr.
Oh,
Olantanji.
me, Olatunji. Olatunji. Hola, Tunji. Yes,
Olantanji. I
so
got it.
yes, you got it. You gotta put to some music. Hola, Tunji. Hola, Olantanji. All right,
Olantanji.
exactly. So yes,
Do you
we
want
used
to
to
ask
have
that?
become more accustomed to therapy, but part of that has to do with just the bigger issues, the broader issues. So one is that pandemic, post-pandemic, or during the pandemic, that there were lots of federal funds that were given to states, and those states took that money and they farmed it out. A lot of services that are being offered because of the funding that came through. And so that is there. However, I would say to parents, don't just accept stuff as it comes or what it is. Be critically minded. Think about it. Think about what it is that you think your child needs and determine whether or not that is appropriate. And you can challenge them. You can ask questions about what kinds of services that they're providing. A lot trauma informed is a buzz concept now. Everybody's talking about trauma informed, and so literally millions if not billions of dollars are going toward trauma informed care, particularly in schools. But the question is it helpful? What kind of outcomes do they have? How is that being assessed? That's why we started CREST program, because we were saying a lot of money is going into this because this is very popular. But do they know and understand children? Are they providing services that are relevant to and interesting so that children will want to be engaged and involved? So that needs to happen. But yes, because of, more recently, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot more money funded for mental health services. And therefore, there are a lot more services that are being provided that have reached out to communities. But that's not enough. We also need to think about whether or not those services are are effective, whether they're not they're useful. And so that's the direction that we need to go in. But yes, I say people are a lot more open to it now than they have in the past. People are much more aware of suicide, suicide prevention, and suicide prevention in the Black community. You'll find people talking about that. We'll find people talking about children who are of different sexual orientation and sexual identity and so on. And so we know the connection between that and them being at risk to issues like human trafficking, for example. Um, and so we need to think about those things. But yes, we are more open, but it's a little more complex than that.
Okay, okay. Ooh, that right there. I tell you, ladies, this is awesome. We're going to take a second to thank our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and let you guys give your final thoughts. Let's thank our sponsors, Mr. Thompson.
Grandma Polly and the Big Rig Kids would love to extend our deepest gratitude, recognizing and thanking our sponsors and supporters for their patronage in supporting us. Simone Enterprises and Entertainment Productions Company, the Simone Family Foundation 501c3, Motherly Music Movement, WITS Writer in the Spirit, TNT Real Estate Team, and KJ Multimedia Solutions. We'd be remiss if we didn't also thank Metropolitan Library, who we held the auditions for the Big Rig Kids play, and Mount Gilead United Methodist Church, and also Nash Road Church of God for providing a space for Grandma Polly and the Big Rig Kids play coming in April. Details to come. Thank you. Your generosity and your belief in our mission have fueled our efforts and inspired us to reach new heights. If you'd like to learn how to become a BRK sponsor or a faithful follower, contact our Facebook page at Conversations with Grandma Polly, or also contact us at 980-833-9307.
I was feeling that beat. Y'all gotta forgive me. When we get to the end, I always feel that beat because I love my sponsors. You know, we would not be here without our sponsors, and we're always looking for sponsors. We're always looking for businesses that we could get their little snippet out there, you know, to tell people more about them. So we'll talk about that later on down the road, but I'm going to give each of you guys 90 seconds. Each of y'all got 90 seconds. Who want to go first?
Well, I'll go first. I do. I'd like to go first. So, first of all, I want to thank you so much, Big Red Kids, Miss Renee Brown, the whole team for everything that you do and for including us in what you know, your programming. I want to encourage all the parents, caregivers, if you're an educator or a clinician, to go to our website, crestprogram.com. I'm sure Dr. West Olatunji must have mentioned it, but we have a course entitled Culture Centered Mondays. And we cover a lot of this because we can't cover all of this in one or two webinars. I would highly recommend that for parents of Black children and other children of color. We need to have these dialogues, super important. So I appreciate this opportunity to get the conversation started. And hopefully there'll be more conversations that parents will be having with their children once they get a little bit more training about how to do it in a developmentally appropriate way.
Dr. Olantanji. I got it, I think.
Well done. Well done. Yes, I will just say, in addition to what Dr. West has talked about, that's so important, is that we emphasize resilience and coping and to really emphasize what's wonderful, what is fantastic, because the world is telling us that Black people is at the very best, second to white people or second to others. And we have to know for ourselves how amazing we are. So we've talked a lot about trauma and trauma among Black children, but we can also talk about coping and resilience. And there are I have just as many stories about how a resilient Black children who, by all accounts, shouldn't be here, but not only are they here, they're amazing, right? So I would say to
Yeah.
Black parents who are listening right now, be sure that when every day that you wake up and you say something to your children about how amazing they are as Black children, specifically as Black children, if you thought about that, that you could say something every day about them, about how amazing they are as Black children, you would begin to see a difference in how they behaved, how they thought, how they interacted with others, how creative they would be, how happier they would be. Just that small thing. If you said something to your child every day that was amazing, right, about them as Black children.
Amen. Amen. And I say, Amen. And I say,
That is awesome. And I'm telling you, ladies, I am just thrilled to be in your presence because you guys are so amazing. You guys are, and I appreciate it so much. And we're gonna talk November 2nd because you know we barely got through half of the show. Barely got through half of what we have here. And something's okay. Something is going on with my phone, but we only got through half of it. See, I know we got to come back and do that second half, but y'all remember also that on Monday nights. Am I correct? You guys have that Monday night session that people could come
No.
into.
Oh, you're talking about the training, Culture Centered Mondays.
Yes, the
Yeah,
training. Yes.
yeah, that you can access
Yeah.
anytime. That's up on our
what's
training
that?
platform. Access it anytime, not just
Okay.
Mondays, anytime.
Okay. We will make sure we share that. And once again, thank my audience for joining us. And remember to share it with your friends. Tell a friend about us. Thank you guys for joining us again tonight. So we're looking forward to seeing you guys there. It's peace out, and we love you guys.